Sunday the 30th of July 2023. In this news flash I'm going to talk about Putin and grain, and food in general. And I was thinking a lot about this one and thought it should actually be a rip the plaster off or what a fuck moment or what. But it is driven by news, so let's stick to it and keep it as news. It may be a little bit longer than a normal news flash. Now before I start, I need you to look at the following video. Look at that clip and listen carefully to what that reporter says.
Is now plying his trade in the Chisamba district of Zambia. Here too, he has made a mark, becoming the first exporter of blueberries from Zambia to China. He lost his 1,000-hectare farm in Zimbabwe to an army general and is planning to buy a 15,000-hectare farm in Zambia, but is not proud about his success in his new country.
Obviously, it doesn't make me feel good because I know the potential of Zimbabwe. If it was a net exporter, it can return to be a net exporter. All it needs is a correct policies and you'll be a net exporter. It's as simple as that. Let the private sector run agriculture.
In 2000, the government of then Zimbabwean President Robert Mugabe seized land from white farmers, saying it was reversing colonial imbalances which left black farmers with only infertile land. That led to Ray's move to Zambia. Officials in Zimbabwe did not respond to a request for an interview. Zambia National Farmers Union spokesman Kakoma Calvin Kalei says about 300 displaced Zimbabwean farmers applied to settle here in the early 2000s. He sums up their work in Zambia.
Let's look at what they have managed to contribute in terms of production. Wheat production, jumping from 60,000 metric tons per year in 2009 to somewhere averaging between 300 to 420,000 metric tons per year. If you look at the contribution of the Zim farmers, massive contribution.
Kalei added that Zambia now exports onions, tomatoes, potatoes, and maize. Ironically, Zimbabwe, once the breadbasket of the region, imported maize from Zambia last year. Kelvin Ambwezia, chairman of Zambia's Food Reserve Agency, says his country wants to earn more foreign currency from the agriculture sector in which the former Zimbabwean farmers are involved.
I know of farmers that are doing high-value crops for export. The impact is enormous. You can't dwarf the impact that they've made or the contribution they've made to our agricultural sector. So we have benefited a lot, and we hope that they don't go back.
And Zambia is benefiting from the relationship. Columbus Mavungam for VOA News, Chisamba, Zambia.
The reason why I'm including this clip is I had a rude awakening this morning. I shared some information about Malema's talk about the white people again yesterday with a guy that I have built a relationship with over the past month, and his response absolutely stunned me. And I was talking about the fact that the XXX is planning famine for South Africa. And I mentioned the fact that the onslaught against our white farmers is tremendous. And we should really pay attention to it. And I referred him to Zambia, what happened in Zambia. And this was his response. I said, Zambia made a U-turn and is now a food exporter. And then his response, because white saviors went to Zambia to help useless blacks. And look at that emojis. I was fucking stunned when I read this. I couldn't fucking believe it. And me being me, it triggered a million thoughts in my mind. Now, before I'm going to talk about those thoughts, let's look at the following that happened in St. Petersburg. Putin, Black Sea grain deal became meaningless. And then the commentator that posted this said, but Putin is calling bullshit on this issue for some very interesting reasons. And we all know that the main reason why Putin cancelled that deal was for the fact that the West, with Ukraine, were using that grain routes to smuggle weapons and arms into Ukraine. And that the bulk of the grain that was exported on that route did not go to the needy nations. It went to the developed nations and to the EU. And more disturbing is, despite the fact that there is hunger in parts of Africa and in Asia, the food that the grain that the EU got, the bulk of it went in as feeding their livestock. Plus, there's other stories about that grain and nobody really wants to talk about it. The fact of the matter is Ukraine has got a very lack attitude towards insecticides and things like that. So there was reports from the EU that people in the EU have indicated that the toxicity of the Ukrainian grain is extremely high, and it is GMO grain. Plus, they are absolutely infested with insecticides. So it's all about the quality. But the world made as if the grain blockade would starve the whole African continent and a large part of Asia and a large part of South America, which is total bullshit. Putin said Russia only agreed to the deal for the sake of the countries in Africa and Latin America, but that only around 3.2 to 3.4% of the grain goes to the world's countries, while poorest countries, while 40% went to the prosperous countries. According to the UN data, around 3% of the exports under the Black Sea deals has gone to low-income countries, while high-income countries get around 44% and the rest to middle-income countries. So it was a bullshit story, and as I said, it was used to smuggle arms into Ukraine. Look what happened in Odessa after Putin cancelled that deal and they started bombarding the Odessa harbor. The West makes a big fucking story, and that Ursula von der Crazy herself makes a big fucking story about the Russians blowing up the grain handling systems and the grain storage systems and so forth. But if you look at the videos and you see how those things explode, the Russians says that those facilities were used as storage for arms and armaments. But the West think the Russians are stupid. Now they're learning their lessons. And then this. Putin pledged 25,000 to 50,000 tons of grain each to Burkina Faso, Zimbabwe, Mali, Somalia, Central African Republic and Eritrea. Most of those nations have refrained from criticizing Putin's invasion of Ukraine. The shipments would make up a significant chunk of imports for the likes of Zimbabwe and Eritrea, but a tiny portion of Russia's sales. Now take note, Zimbabwe, and think back about that video that I played. Zimbabwe, they need food aid, where they were an exporter of food a few years back. But thanks to their brilliant plan, let's get all the white farmers out. That is the thing. And then about that remark that guy gave me this morning, where he very sarcastically referred to the white saviors and the dumb blacks. That is the attitude they have. That is that no fucking insight. That's it. And then listen to this. Putin tells African leaders, I'll give you free grain despite hypocritical West. I'll give you free grain. And then in another remark, I forgot to screenshot the clip, Putin said that Russia is ready and willing and able to assist the African farmers to improve their production, because Putin says that Africa can be self-sufficient in food and a major world supplier of food. But no, these racists here in South Africa, they think it's a fucking good plan to fuck up the farmers. And then they will go and sit and ask Putin for free grain. And he will look at them with a begging bowl in their hands, and he's most probably, he might not say it because he's a fucking gentleman, but he will think, oh, okay, so now you want free grain, but you destroyed your own farming sector. Clever plan. But now let me come to the main drive of this Skidmark. White farmers in South Africa need to understand these blacks will not rest until they have destroyed you and your farms. They will not rest. They will keep on fucking you up as hard as possible. Now, I have done videos in which I have clearly made my position clear about the people leaving, and I call them the lot spotters. But now, this morning, I have got a message for white, yes, white South African farmers. Just as your ancestors reached a point in Europe where they could not see a future anymore, and they came to South Africa. They left everything behind and they came to South Africa. I think, and this is contrary to what I've been preaching, I think the time has come for you white farmers to look at your children and imagine their future. It is clear from what Malema said yesterday, and when I see on the black groups where I am, the support that Malema has got from intellectuals, I have only one message for you. Your white children in the farming industry has no future in South Africa. They don't have a future. Then listen to what Putin is saying. Then keep in mind that Russia has already accommodated a large number of white South African farmers. And I saw publications on where there was spoken about the fact that those white South African farmers are now contributing heavily to the Russian record harvests. The Russians understand the skills in the white South African farmers. The Zambians took in that white Zimbabwean farmers, and you've heard it in that video. What was the effect? From 60,000 tons a year to 450,000 tons a year production in grain. But here in South Africa, that is not taken note of. These blacks here in South Africa want the whites off the land. So you, as a commercial farmer, contributing to feeding the South African nation, your children do not have a future here. You should really focus on getting a future for them. Go and talk to the Russians and see if you cannot get them a place in a country where they will be appreciated and respected. Hungary also takes white South African farmers because they understand the value of food production. The South African blacks in general do not understand the value of food security. They don't. And I'm telling you, every farmer in South Africa, every bag of mealies that you produce that is more than what you and your family need is used to feed the fuckers that want to destroy you. So you are feeding your own destructors. Think about that. So for your children's future's sake, if it's any way possible, try and find them a future in a country where they will be appreciated and where their skills will be appreciated and where they will be respected. Don't feed these people that want to destroy you. Do not do it. I made the fucking mistake of putting an image up of starving children, black children, and I said, this is what XXX is planning for you. And he came back and said, why do you use black children? I thought to myself, what the fuck is that? But a lot of black academics have written papers on the psyche of the black community in general. Forever victims. You cannot, I as a white man, cannot show them facts and say, listen, this and this is the facts, this is what they're planning. I'm a fucking racist. So, let them walk that road. Let them walk that road. Let them experience, let them have the Zimbabwean experience, the Ethiopian experience. Let them have that experience of children dying of hunger. They will not understand before they actually experience it. At this point in time, the white farmers are keeping them big, fat and happy and energized to fuck the farmers up. How does that make sense? There's no logic in it. And your farmers associations, you the farmers, better get those fucking association guys into your bloody meetings and tell them, what the fuck are you doing? Find us somewhere to go. Unfortunately, a lot of sputters went to Canada and they thought that there was a clever plan at that stage, and where are they today? They're in a fucking society that is godless and Satanists and have no respect for decent values. So they basically fucked there. Same as they were in South Africa. Those that went to Australia, where the hell are they? They're in a fucking hellhole, controlled by the XXX, where the demise of the total Australian population is planned and executed in front of their eyes. So, my advice, see if you cannot find a landing spot in Russia, because there, you're in a nation that respects good values. It's a Christian nation. They've got a Christian leader. And before you try and deflect, Chechnya is a Muslim nation, part of the Russian Federation. But they pledged their total support to Putin, to Russia. Although Putin and Russia is basically Christian. And those Muslims are not these fuckers that you see on the news and on the TV and so, those extremist cuck that the West sifted out in Middle East and imported to them in concentrated form. And those things are now fucking their countries up. Good Muslims that respects good values. So, Putin has showed how it can work. And these blacks in South Africa, they don't want to look at the facts and realize that they are neck deep in the shit. No, they want to hit the racism bandwagon and they promote this thing of all whites must die, all whites must go, all whites are bad, all whites must be chased into the sea. That is the fucking mantra that they are feeding while they're wiping the fat and millipap from their lips that was fed to them by that hated white farmer. So, my final message to you, if you are a farmer in South Africa and you have children that wants to farm, help them to get into Russia, because the Russians know that they can control the world with food. The West is destroying their food production at an alarming rate and making shit in labs and things, poison that they want to feed you. Russia, zero GMO. Russia understands the value of food. And if you're a food producer, go to Russia. Please give me a like and a subscribe and share the thing. Thank you for your support.